Hey guys, we will learn everything about CSS Grid properties. We will cover all of these step by step. After covering these things, we are going to build these two projects. One of this one, second one is this one. Remember, these are for the practicing layout. So we're not going to focus on how we can make things beautiful. The main thing and most important thing to learn how to have control about your layouts. Because if you can't control your layouts, you cannot build anything. Lastly, I will recommend you to have this article or any article that you prefer. If you follow along with the articles, you can see some properties visually and you can understand them better. But remember, only articles will not help us to learn everything. We actually have to practice and we have to build something in order to truly understand them. So let's get started. First of all, why CSS Grid? If we don't use CSS Grid, we will have really hard time to accomplish even simple tasks. But with CSS Grid, it will really make things easy, removes complexity, and we will have powerful tools to build almost anything that we imagine. So basically, if you want to build something, you really have to learn both Grid and Flexbox. You can almost accomplish anything that Flexbox does with the Grid, but there are some times that you will choose Flexbox over Grid or Grid over Flexbox. So basically, we really have to learn both of these. So differences between Flexbox and Grid. Remember, in Flexbox, we have main axis, which is X by default, and cross axis Y by default. And we can swap them, right? But in Grid, there is no swapping or something like that. And when you think Grid, you always have to mindset there is a column and rows terminology. And as I said, you can swap, reverse these two, but in Grid, there is no reverse or something. Grid doesn't have main or cross axis. When I first learned Flexbox, I was thinking that, okay, I can wrap things and there we go, I have columns and rows. Well, technically we have multiple rows, but remember, you can't control things like you can control in Grid. So when you wrap things and when you have multiple rows and multiple columns, that doesn't mean that it can do anything that Grid does. They are different. We have wrap because it makes things easy for Flexbox. But in Grid, we also have Grid Autoflow, which we'll cover in detail. Basically, what it means, instead of creating rows, we can change this behavior to create columns. We rarely use column, but there are some times that it's really useful. These are all the properties that we have. We will cover everything. These are the shorthands, but sometimes I never use shorthands. For instance, I don't use this one. Instead, I will use this tree because it's more clear, readable. But we will use gap because it's really easy to use. Or instead using start or end separately, it's really easier to use just Grid column. This is just your preference. You can do whatever you want. Let's briefly talk about Grid line, Grid track, Grid cell, and Grid area. These are Grid lines, each of these. All right. Grid track is something like this. So each row or each column like that is a grid track like that. These are grid tracks. Grid cell is like this, the single cell between 4 grid line. Grid area is multiple grid cells that are close to each other. Like that, like this. This is grid area, this is grid area, this is also grid area. So you got the point. CSS Grid is just like Excel table. So imagine that we have table element. If we gave this to grid, and if we define columns, 3 columns and 3 rows, always have mindset that you create something like Excel table. Notice how we create our grid, and these two extremely important. At the moment we explicitly say 1, 2, 3 column and 1, 2, 3 row that we want to create, and notice the second row is bigger and second column 2 times bigger than these two, because this is how we defined, and I created in Excel so visually you can understand better. In grid, the most important thing that we have to understand is explicit and implicit. When we create our grid like that, this is what we explicitly saying. Our grid will have 3 columns and 3 rows. This is how we want it to be. Imagine in Excel I create like that. So what will happen if I try to add one more thing inside? It will create next row, right? So whenever we need some more data, it will create one more row. And this is where the implicit terminology comes. When something doesn't fit in our table, if we have additional information, the one automatically row will be created. And this is the same idea in the grid. When there are more elements in HTML, it will automatically create extra row by default for us. And we can have control over these things, but we will cover them later. Again, always have mindset. Where is my explicit? Where is my implicit? Also, we can change this default behavior. Instead of rows, we can tell to the grid, hey, don't use the row, but instead create columns for me. So when we need more data, it will create more column, not row. If we want, we can change this behavior. Lastly, these are the other alternatives that you can create just this explicit grid like this, 1FR, 1FR, repeat, or even use the percentages. But the best way is to use fractions instead of using pixels or RAM, things like that. When it comes to CSS Grid, always remember that we will use these things constantly and try to stick with the fractions instead of other units. Let's see everything in code. So what we have here, we have basic HTML, 30 divs, and sometimes I will comment to make things easier if it's necessary. And we have basic CSS. Remember, right now they are not grid or grid items. They are just divs, and this is how divs behaves. It's black element, it will take all the space that it can. We have border green on the grid container. which is div at the moment, and these things on the grid items. Let's open inspect. You can see that the grid container doesn't have any grid or something on it. Let's convert our div to grid. As soon as save, you see that this element became grid, and also we can see in here. So when we try to inspect it, we will have these numbers. Whenever we create a grid, it will have only one column. So since we have one column and we have these things, CSS Grid will create implicit rows, means it will create rows, whatever content we have, whatever it needs. So this is why these rows are implicit. It's not explicit. Before I forget, I just want to mention about inline grid. It will treat like this. This setting is there. I don't think that you are going to use it too much, but it's there. We will stick with the grid. Now, when we say our grid is going to be 2 column, okay, we have 1, 2, and then when the content doesn't fit, it will tries to create space for it. Also notice that it starts with 1, 2, 3, it goes like that. Let's create a row, it will make more sense. Now I'm saying give me 2 rows, each of these is going to be 100 pixel. So when I save, now you can see that this is our explicit rows and columns that we defined. If I come here and change this to something else, and maybe comment this, you will see that these lines are different than these two. So we have 2 columns, 2 rows, and when the items doesn't fit anymore, it will start to create more rows because this is default behavior. These are implicit rows that grid creates. These are explicitly that we say, hey, I want my grid is explicitly be 2 column and 2 row. Pay attention that these lines are different, but we will come there soon. If I say grid auto flow, which is row by default, but if I change it to the column and save, now pay attention how it's changed. Let me close this one. You can see that we said 2 columns, right? 1, 2, and this line is about explicit that we define. If I do this, you will see it goes down, which means we have only 2 explicitly defined column. So the grid item 5 is going to be create on the column, because this is what we say. We say, hey, when we have more content, I don't want you to create row, but instead create for me the columns. If I change this to 1 row, now you can see we have explicitly 1 row and 2 column, and all the other columns are going to be like this. If I change this to, let's say, 200 pixel, you see that these are explicitly that we define, and these others are implicitly created. Let's change this to alt version and save. Now, the last thing I want to mention about this topic, when I save, again, this is 200 pixel, this is 200 pixel, but the next things are going to take whatever content is. So if I say grid auto rows, I want it to be, let's say, 50 pixel. What this means, whenever we have implicit row, it's going to be fixed size, 50 pixel. You can use minmax, you can use FR, you can use percentages, whatever you want. And same logic for the columns. So you can have control over your rows that are implicitly created. You can change their value. You can control their height when it's row. You can control their width when it's column. Let's talk about these lines, what they are and what we should know about. First of all, when something is explicitly redefined, the line is going to be solid. You see that it's solid line, right? It's not dash or dot. But when something is between our explicitly defined area, it's going to be dash. You see that this is dash. But when something is implicitly created by the browser, this is going to be like dot. This is dash, this is dot, this is solid line. They are different. When we change this to the column and save, you see that the same idea also in here. This is our explicitly defined. This is because it implicitly created column, it's like dot. These are like dash because it's inside our explicit area. You can see the differences. This topic is one of the most important one. Try to really understand what's happening. Let's move. Let's understand line numbers. By default, when you create grid, it's going to give the line numbers. But later on, we will see you can also have named line. Like instead of numbers, maybe you want to give the name to them. But mostly you are going to stick with the numbers, I believe. So it's really important to understand also how the numbers work. So we save, we enable this one, and you can see it's kind of mess. Okay, first of all, what you have to pay attention, some numbers are vertically, some are horizontally, right? This means something for us. When it's vertically like this or like this, you see it's kind of vertical. Its arrow points to the vertically. This is represent two columns. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. When we have two columns, we will have 3 line numbers because this is the only way to have 2 columns. That's why we have 1, 2, and 3 line numbers. Also, this logic works reverse version like -1, -2, -3. And it's going to be handy for us to know these things. The same concept also for rows. We have row 1, row 2, row 3, and it goes whatever it takes. But the most important thing to notice there, notice we say explicitly we want 2 rows, right? Since we say we explicitly want 2 rows, the -2 is going to point 3. It's not going to point 6. This is extremely important. So if you don't know this, you might say, okay, I will do 1, 2, -1, so it will take all the down. No, it's not. It will take until here because -2 is this one, 3, and -2 is going to be 2, and -3 is going to be 1. Again, -1 will represent whatever your explicitly defined row or columns end. If we have one more column, let's say, if we have one more rows, let's say it's going to be what? It's going to be 4. And this is how it works. Let's move. Let's see how gap works. See, we have 3 columns. We will come here soon. And then we have rows, 3 rows. If I do column gap 20 pixel, it will put gap between columns. If I open this one, it will put gap between rows. And this is the shorthand we can apply. 20 pixel, 50 pixel. This is for row, this is for column. Or we can do like this, it's going to be row and column, both of them. Now in here, instead of using 1FR, 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 we can do 3 1FR, which means use 3 times 1FR. Also, we can do something like this. 50 pixel and 100 pixel. What it does, since we put 2 value in here in second argument, it's going to be 3 multiplied by 2, it's going to be 6. So implicitly we will have 6 columns, and it will be 50 pixel and then 150, 150, 100. It's go like this. If you do 25 pixel, it will have 9 columns, like that. But usually we do this instead of fractions. If we use percentage like this, save, notice that we have overflow. So it gives 50% and 50% at first, then it adds additional gap, and this is why we overflow. But with fractions, it doesn't do this. It already knows that we have 50 pixel gap and all the elements, whatever it's going to take, and then only then it calculates the free space that we have and it distributes. Just like flex basis and flex grow. Please, if you don't know this concept, watch my flexbox video where I explain them in detail. So you will have pretty good idea how these things are related with each other, how it works. Let's remove this one. Save. So this is how gap works. Let's move. How do we align things in grid container? Notice we have FR units and it's like that, and we have gap betweens. But instead of this one, I will use the fixed width, which means it will be like this. Again, pay attention to explicit columns and rows that we defined. It's 3 column and 3 rows. Also, if I open this one, you can see the numbers. I can extend the lines so that you can see easier. Now, when I do justify content to center, remember this will be relayed with the X, which means horizontally. So whenever you see justify something, it's related with horizontal. So which means this thing is kind of going to move horizontally. There is no way to move vertically when you use justify. So I saved. You see that because our container, this is our grid container, the green line, our container had free space, right? So this is why we can use justify content. And it's going to center itself. If I do end, it will do end. And start is going to be start, just like flex. Also, you can do space between, space around, all the things that are available in flex, it's also available in here, so that you can have control about aligning things. What about align content? If I do align content, let's say end, save. Well, nothing happened, right? Remember, align content is going to be related with the vertical. So let's remove this one at first. Right now we have 3 rows and we have explicitly defined the height. So what I want, I'm going to say my container height is going to be 600 pixel, and I save. Actually, before saving, let's comment this and save. Now you can see that this is our explicitly defined column and rows, right? This is. So if I want to move these things to the bottom or the center, I can do something like this. And notice, it's not going to put this to here, because we explicitly saying, hey, it's going to be 3 rows. If we had 2 rows, it would be like this. Or if we had no rows at all. So again, having explicitly defined row or columns are really important. So we can do center, save, or space between. You might use the space between and you say, oh my god, why it's not going to down? You will think that something broke with the grid system, but actually not, because you explicitly have 3 rows and the last row is going to be this one. So it's actually space between, but just because you have 4 items and you have no other items, it's going to be like that. Same with the space around or space evenly. Now I believe this is clear now. So let's move. Now we have same concept. Again, I saved, and I will do justify items to the center. Notice that the justify items are going to be related to the items. So when I save, notice that inside this box changed, right? The explicitly defined didn't move. So only items centered inside this box. So if I do end, it's going to be in here, right? See, it moves there. And this is how it works. And save again on the start. Also, there is something justify self, which doesn't exist in Flexbox. If I do grid item 2 justify self wants to be center, what it will do, it will override this value and it will put this item to the center or end. So this is how it works. Let's comment this, save, and let's see how align items work. Well, by default it's stretch, and this is why it stretches. Remember, this is related with the vertical y-axis. So when we do start, save, it will take whatever content is. And same for the center, it will move things to the center. Let's make this things like that, so it's bigger. And end, it moves things to the end. Now I can do center and save, it will center inside these things. Just like we have justify self, we have also align self. Now item 2 is centered, but I want it to be end. Also you can do flex end, but I'm not going to use it. It will be there. If I do start, it will start, or stretch, it will stretch. Now I can also use justify content to the center, let's say, or the end. Same for the align content. Let's do this to the end. This entire thing is going to move down. See? This is how things work. Let's move. I said by default, when we don't have enough rows, Grid will create implicit rows for us so that the other items can reside. At the moment, we have 3 rows that are explicitly defined. So if we inspect, you can see from there also this line represents the end of the rows that explicitly we defined. Now let's open this one and focus on the numbers. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this one is the last one, and 4 columns we have 1, 2, 3, and this is the last one. Let's enable this and save. You see nothing changed because it's default. If we change this to the column, remember this logic is just like an Excel. So in Excel table, when you create additional entry, it creates row right for you automatically. Of course, in Excel, we don't use something like columns, right? It's going to be really weird because it will going to increase like that horizontally, which we don't want usually. So if I save this to the column, this is the same concept. Instead of rows, now notice that this is our column explicit, which is 3, and then it will create additional columns for us. If we have one of our in here, save, it will take this space for this explicitly defined items. if we change this to the row, what will happen? This two columns will take all the free space, and additional row just going to be like this. Now we can do a bunch of things with this implicitly created rows. One of them is this one, so grid template rows. Now it only creates by the content size. So if I came here to say, let's say 7 and font size to 3 rem, when I save, notice the other row also is going to be equal like this, just like Excel. When you have data like that and when you want to create something like this and save, now it doesn't extend, but if you have like this setting, it's going to be the same idea, as you can see. Now let's remove this one and do this to, let's say 200 pixel. When we save, oh, I made a mistake because it's overriding this one. So it's going to be grid auto rows. So we are going to deal with the auto rows that are creating. So remember, it was like that. And now when I change this to 200, let's make it something small. Now you can see these are 120 pixels. So the implicitly created rows are going to be 120 pixels, just because we have the setting. The same idea also for the columns. If you do this, each columns that are going to be created is going to be 120 pixels. So you can do like this if you want. Let's move. Now we understand what is grid container, how we align things. Let's see how we can change a grid item positions. Now let's enable numbers and our grid. You can see we have 3 columns, 3 rows. Now what I want to change the grid item 1, instead of taking 1 grid cell, I want it to take 2. We can do something like this. Grid column will start from 1 and will do span 2. Now again, this is shorthand. If I inspect here, you can see it's combination of column start and column end. Instead of using span 2, you can also specify, let's say line 3, right? So it will take from 1 to 3, which means it will take 2, span 2 grid cell. If you change this to 3, it will take all of it. Remember, we say, let's change this one to 4, right? We say from 1 to 4. Also, we know that -1, -2 are going to represent these things. You see, these are vertical. So I can say, instead of 4, -1. So it's going to be same, or -2. It will be like this. This is sometimes really useful. So let's say you always want to take one span from the last one. In this case, you will do -2. In this case, also, we can just do span 2, right? What just happened? Because I typed, you have to make the space. Let's save. So you can see, since item 1 starts with the 1, it will only take to span 2. So now you can see it start, span 2 and auto, which means if the grid item 1 wasn't on line 1, this result wouldn't happen. So having explicitly defined start point might be really useful. So keep this in mind. If you want to grid item 1 start from 1 to 3, always do explicitly define it. Let's do grid item 2 span 2. So what it will happen, it will try to fit in here, but it didn't fit, so that's why it moves the next line. If I say I want this to start with column 2 like that, it will be this one. So it will also skip here, even though it can fit, but we explicitly say, hey, I want start from 2. If I say I want from here and 3, save. Now you can see this will create implicit one more column because it didn't fit. And the other items like 6 is going to put in here because we have empty space. If I say grid column span 2 for the item 6, it's not going to fit in here, and this is why it will move in here. If I save, if I do again like this and saved, like that, now it will move additional one more because it doesn't fit. But let's do these things undo, because you usually probably not do this. You wanna have control over your layout, and this is why it's important to know where you explicitly define your start points. Now the same concept with the grid row. I can say it will start from 1 to 3. So what is 1 is here, what is 3 is here. So 3 in this case is -2. If I save, you see it will take this much space. And because 2 can fit in here, it will fit in here, and then so on. If I come to the 2 and say, hey, I want you to be span 2 and save, the 2 will move here, but the 3 will not move here or somewhere. It will keep moving, okay? The default behavior, the items will not check the before empty. Like this, skip this 2 because it didn't fit, but even this 3 can fit. By default, it's not going to be in here. It will check from where it left. So it will check here. So let's say we have also item 3, something doesn't fit. Let's give it this time span 3. Okay, so item 3 clearly will not fit in here, and it will check next spot. So if I save, now you can see item 3 will take 3 span. If I want my item 1 to take from row 1 to the end, which is row 3, remember this is our explicit line. So for item 1, I want it to take all of it, and I save. Now you can see it almost take all of our explicitly defined space. And just because this doesn't fit in here or here, it's going to move to implicit place. Same for these things. So if you want to do something like this, it will take all of it. Let's move. I want to quickly mention about dance because you might use it when you don't care about orders. So it can be useful for something like image gallery or anything that you really don't care about orders. So our items are like that. This is our container. So each child, those can be divisible to 3, and those who can be divisible to 5, it's going to be red. Now we save, we have this one, and if I change this to span 3, column and row, and save, you see it's going to be like that. So 6 doesn't fit here, so it moves to there. But 7 can fit here, and 10, and so on. Now if I change this to also like that and save, you see now how it's changed. Like, you can't even follow how it's changed, right? It's changed so differently because we define like that. Now you can see some space are there, right? Because this item, when it start to check, like I said before, it's going to check where it left. So for instance, this grid item normally could fit in here, but it's not going to be in here. It will be here because after 12, it will check this spot, not this spot. If you don't like this behavior, there is something called dance. So when you enable this, now what it does, it's going to check from start again. So if there is an empty spot and if this item can fit in there, it's going to fit there. So in this case, I believe the 7 item will be in here. And then 8 is going to be in here because it will fit there. And so on. Also, let's enable numbers. By the way, if you're worrying why these are not span 2, because remember, it's about explicitly defined and implicitly created rows. If you do something like this, now you can see how it dramatically changed. But I will undo this because to make things more easily to understand. Remember, it was like that, like this. And now if I enable this one and save, you see the item 7 goes in there and 8 like this. So basically all the spaces are now closed. So this is how you can use dance. Let's move. I said by default the browser will give each line to the numbers. So 1, 2, 3, and same for the rows. If we want, we can give them a name, something like this. Let's say I want this to be column 1, which this 1 is now column 1, and I want this to be call 2, so this is call 2, and lastly this one is call 3. So now if I save, nothing is going to change, but if I do something like this, again nothing changed, but something like that, from call 1 to call 3, again it's really same as saying like this. So you see nothing changed. Also, you can give multiple names like call X maybe. So I saved and I give it to call X. It's going to refer this one. So you can have multiple name on the same line. If you remove this, it's not going to work. The same concept for the rows. You can do row 1 in here and row 4 in this case, let's say. Also, let's say sidebar or any content, anything that you want to give the name. It's really up to you. Now, if I do item 1 is going to be row 1 to row 4 and save, it will take all of it. If I say row of 3, it's not going to happen. Means we didn't define. Notice how we kind of skipped 4, just like when it's happened in the column. So we don't want to do this. If you use the names, you have to be sure that you use the right names. This is now how it works from row 1 to 3. Let's move. Our grid have 3 columns and 3 rows that we explicitly define, and then one additional implicitly row that created by grid system. There is something called grid template areas where we can control about our grid. It's really cool feature. So let's say I want this item 1 to treat like header or navbar. So I want it to go from start to end. In this case, let's say it's header, okay? So right now we have 3 columns. In this case, we will use 3 times header. So 1, 2, 3 header and save. Well, nothing changed because in order to this work, we also have to select this item and say grid area to be header. Also notice we not use double quote or something, just header and save. Now you can see the grid item 1 takes all the space, the thing that we define like this. Now this represents to row 1, but let's say in row 2 you want it to be like hero section or something. So you come here, you say hero, hero, hero. And let's say you want it to be grid item 3. So you come here like that. Now, if I save, you see the item 3 is became like that. Also, you can do this, right? Like that. So the second row and the third row is going to be hero. If I save, you see that it's happened just like we want. And let's make this to 4 and save, and then give it to footer. And I want item 4 to be footer. Let's save. You can see how it's easy and it's really powerful tool. You can have 6 columns or 12, whatever you design your website. And remember, only a single grid item can be also a grid. So if you come here, let's say grid item 4, right? Actually, we already selected if I want this to be display grid. But let's say this time I want grid template columns to be repeat. 12 columns. And if I save, well, nothing is going to appear, but notice that this item 4 became a grid container. Means if I enable this, you'll see that everything that happened in the normal grid container up to now we do, it's also inside here. So you can do grid template row is going to be also, let's say 5. So you have no limit, what I'm trying to say. Also, you can see in here the preview. If you come enable this one, you see the preview also in here. So basically now our grid item 4 is also grid container and grid item at the same time. So you have no limit basically. You can do whatever you want. You can have multiple nested grids or grid inside Flexbox, or you can convert a flex item into grid container. So you have no limit. And lastly, if I want, let's say, to skip here, if I do that and save, now grid item is going to only take 2 space. If I do this and save, it's only going to take whatever we define, and these items will come the empty space, because this is how grid behaves. So again, it's really important to know what you're doing. Let's move this one. So this is how it works. It's really powerful. Let's move. Let's see how does auto fit and fit work. These two are really important to understand because probably you are going to use them a lot. So at the moment we have repeat 3 and 100 pixel. Remember, if it was 1FR, what it does, it's going to take all of the space, right? So if we save, it will use the space that we have. But let's do this to, again, 100 pixel and save. Now, if I enable here, you see that we explicitly have 3 columns, right? So in this case, no matter what, if I change the size, it's not going to change because we say explicitly give me 3 column. There is no way to grid make another column without we order to say, hey, give me 4 column or whatever. So what's the point? So there are times that we actually don't know how many columns we need. So in this case, we will need autofill or auto fit. This is the whole idea about it. So let's say I don't know how many columns I want. So in this case, I will use autofill. I will do like this. Now let's save. Actually, nothing changed, but if I expand, you see that our explicitly defined line also moves, and we have items 6 and 7 in here. Whenever you see we have free space, and this is 100 pixel, so whenever the 100 pixel available in here, this item will move here. So this is why when I said we don't know how many columns we will have, so it's going to put items automatically whenever it's available. So this is autofill, but remember, if I enable this one, you see at the moment it's 8, right? So we basically have 7 columns and the last line number is 8. If I expand, you see it's became 9. So this is because we do autofill. So if we again expand like this, it's going to move. So our explicitly columns at the moment, it's actually 12 column, but the last one is, the number is 13. Now let's move this to the back so that we can see what's different between fill and fit. Now if I do fit and save, well, again, I moved, and you see that again, whenever it's available, it's going to fill, right? So now 7, 8. Now the thing is, with the fit, it doesn't expand our explicit column like fill. You see the number increase, but it's all stacked on top of each other. So the last one is not going to be like the fill. So for me to remember this behavior, remember fill, the last word is like fill, right? 2L. So this 2L is like columns. So whenever it's 2L, it will create additional columns, explicitly columns. But when it's fit, this behavior is not available. This is how I remember it. Now I believe this is clear, so let's see how it works with something we call minmax. So minmax, you basically give the minimum value and the maximum value. Let's say again, I want this to minimum to be 100 pixel and maximum to be 1FR. So whatever space left. And I will do this to fill, just like we saw the first one. So I saved. Notice that each item a bit extend because we say maximum 1FR. So what FR does, it uses the empty space. So before, when we does this, it creates empty space, right? But at the moment, that empty space, which is lower than 100 pixel, it's going to distribute to each item. So at the moment we have 4 items. So if there is 70 pixel available free space, it will distribute like 7 divided by 4, and it will distribute each of these. As soon as it became 100 pixel free space available, just like we saw before, this item is going to be put in here. So at the moment when you inspect, right, it's 115. So now if I expand, you see it became bigger. Now as soon as 100 pixel available, now it's available, right? So the item 5 moves there. So now you can see they are really close to 100 pixel. If I do like something like this, you see it's almost 100 pixel. So this is how it works. So then when we do this, you see again it's moved there. If I extend, now it became 8 just because it's autofill. Now you can see just because this is autofill, when it has empty free space, it will create additional column for us, because fill is like LL, it will create, like you see LL, it will create additional columns for us. And these things are almost 100 pixels. This is how it behaves. And at the moment we have 12 explicitly defined columns. Now let's do the same thing for the fit so that we really can understand. I saved. Now it will do the same behavior, right? Because up until now there is nothing different. We still have these items and they will move to here. Now it moves again, it moves, but the difference is when it finish, like when there is no item anymore. So if I extend, you see that the number changed, but our explicit line kind of stays same, and these items are using all the free space that is available. And this is differences between fit and fill. Now I hope this is really clear for you. This is the most complex thing that to understand, at least it was for me. With autofill and fit, with min max, you can do really good things. And notice there is no media query or something, it just happened by itself. You can do 400 pixel and save. It just work perfect. Let's move. Now we covered everything in this list. It's time to move to practice. I know I didn't mention things like this or this. You usually don't use this because it's really readable if you use this, but it's just personal preference. You might use this or you might use this too. It's up to you. Same for here or here. Let's move to the projects. For this project, if you open, we will have start and end, means finished CSS. So inside the HTML, you can toggle whichever you want, but of course we will start with the start one. Let's inspect to the finished one. So we have something like this. When we do this, the container moves like that, so on and so forth. You can accomplish this one by many different ways, and also it's really important how you structure your HTML. So I will show you how I do it, but as I said, there are many different ways to accomplish, so feel free to experiment by your own. So let's do this and enable the start font. The finished project is like this. You can see when we shrink it change. For this project, if you notice, the image is kind of behind and these images are on this line or background, whatever you call. Now let's check the HTML at first. We have website, which is entire website, and then this section, hero section, entire section, and gather background wrapper to images. So let's go to CSS. Let's target to website, display grid, and I like to do something like this. This is the most simple thing that we can do. And when we save, now the website has grid just like we defined. But notice the images are taking everything. So to understand what's really happening, I will target image for the simplicity. So then later we can change these things. So you can see that we have dotted line. This means it's implicitly created, this row. So we kind of have to think how we will handle these things. Now we have hero, which is immediately child of this one. So I can target it and do some stuff like grid column, because I want this to take everything as a column. If I save, now it takes, but if you inspect the hero, it's there, but it's kind of not exists. So we have to give the height and save. Now it takes entire page, but it's grid item, right? It's not grid itself. Like when you do this, see, this is website, this is hero. So what I want to really do to give the background image to the mountain in the image and save. Now our image applied, but we have to do some other settings for the image. Background size to cover and save. Now we can see our image is there. Inside hero we have this div, and we wanna kinda have control, and we want to put this from here to there. So this is the gallery background, and the images are inside here. So what we can do, we can say the hero is going to be display grid, and we want to give it to the same, just like the website, like 100 pixel, 100 far, and 100 pixel. Now when we save, the hero became to the grid, and this one is grid item. Now we can target this one, gallery background, and grid column is going to be what? Is going to be from 1 to -1, because this is what we are trying to do. So I will save. It seems nothing changed, but if I give it to some background color, something like that, and save, at the moment it covers everything. And before it was like this, now it's like that. What we can do, we want to push this to the down, right? So its parent is hero, and if we come here and say align items to the end and save, now it's at the bottom, because normally what it is, it's stretch, right? This is why it's like that. So we don't want this, we will do end. So it will push to the end. Now inside this we have this one, and we want this to start from here and end in here. In this case, we have to convert this also to the grid. So gallery background. Oh, actually it's not gallery background because we wanna do on this one, because images are inside here. We have this div, so we wanna target this one. So gallery images wrapper. So gallery images wrapper display grid, save, nothing is going to change, and we will apply this one, same one. Now it's kind of we messed up again, because if we inspect, it's one column, right? Let's do this. It's one column and it creates additional rows, implicit rows. This is why we have this behavior. But now we can target this one and we can arrange things. So gallery images grid column is going to be from 2 to 3. So grid column from 2 to 3, but instead 3 I will do -2. So it's the same. Save. Now images are from here to there. But remember, we want to have the flexibility, right? Now if I temporarily remove this, you see that everything messed up. It's really hard to control and understand, so I will later fix this one soon. Now, since we want to have control over here, when we shrink, we really have to convert also this gallery images to grid so that we can have control. Let's do this. Now I saved, and again the same thing happened. But what we want this one, and then we will use repeat as we learned, because it will be flexible. Like we don't know how many images is going to fit, so we do auto fit minmax, and we want to do something like this. And if it's bigger than 250 pixel, we want it to take free space. Let's save. Now this approach is better, but we kind of missed something. And the missed part is that we want to have control over this. Now we can work on here, but I'm going to just take it explicitly, like gallery image, and then I will say width is going to be 100%. So when I save, now since I explicitly said, hey, my width is going to be like this, and inside the image we say 100%, and it will take the 100% whatever the content is. So if I do this, it's going to work, but we kind of have problem with the high. So if I come and say high, let's say 200 pixel, now you can see, now if we do something like this, it's going to work. This is what was we trying to do. Now you can go and give to some paddings to here, padding to pixel, 20 pixel, 10 pixel, and like that. And also column gap. This is how we are going to make it. Now it works perfect. Let's move to the other project. Next, we have this project. When you check this project, you can see that this is the header, this is other thing, whatever it is, and this is something else, and these are some other stuff, and this is kind of like footer. If you notice, there are gaps in here, but there is no gap in here, which means we want to have something that it's going to be flexible. Now, when we do this, you see after some specific pixel, it's changed to like this, and this bar shows. Also, for this one, this comes to under the picture. I actually forget to do this, but you can easily do it after you understand how we are going to do these things. And the same thing is in here. When we shrink, it just became 2 and then 1. For footer, it's like this. Now, when we check our HTML, we have header, products, special offers, and achievements and footer. Let's work on the project, so it's really going to be much more easier to see what's really happening. Now, I will enable the start style. This is how it's going to look like. I applied a few HTML so that we can work with things easily. And these are things that I put to follow much more easier. At the end, we will remove them. So let's get started. Let's target a website, do display grid, and do grid template column. I want this to be 75 pixel and 3 times 1 FR. You can do whatever you want in this case, but I will keep it short so that you will get the idea. Now our grid is like that, but you can see it's really kind of messed up. And I'm going to use grid template areas. I will do header, 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 5 times header because we have 1 in here, 1 in here, and 3 between. So it's 5. Let's save like that. Actually, we can also give it to gap so that we can see more easy. Or maybe just row gap because we will interested in the row gap. Now, let's do header. We want our header to take from 1 to end, right? So in this case, we first have to do what? Grid template area for the header, right? So header grid area is going to be header and save. Now we can see things get better. Then I'll do padding 0.75 pixel. Now when you check this, it's kind of, we have some other additional settings. So we wanna do this header also the grid so that we can control these things. Let's do this. Display grid. I will do 2 columns, so it's going to be easier. Let's say 2 fraction, 1 fraction, and then grid template row 1, 2, 4. And let's do background color so that we can see it easily. Something like that. It's safe. Now, when we inspect the header, we see that we have menu hamburger div and this logo and this right top. This is why we have something like that. And this one is overflow. But we will handle things. Let's move. So right top head. So what I want to do this. Remember, if you enable It's 1, 2, 3, right? Let's target this right top header. I want this to go from 2 to the end as a column. If I save, it came there, and as a row, I want from 1 and take 1 span. Actually, if you omit this, it's going to be the same, but let's just put there. Now, to have control inside here, in this case, having flexbox is going to be much more easier. So there is no need to use grid for things like that. So you can inspect. We have 4 div or 5 div, and each of these, if we do display flex, default, it's going to be side by side. Let's do column gap, make 10 pixel, save, and then align items to the center, because we want this to be center, right? And save. Okay, it gets center, but what about this one? We have this too, and we can convert this also to the flex box. So will not add display flex, save, and we have to apply again to align items. Also, to make gap between these two, we can use column gap, maybe 7 pixel or whatever. Now it looks really good. What about here? It is this item and it's grid item. So we can do grid row from to the span 1, because we want it to reside in here. And for the columns, it's going to be from 1 to 2. So grid column 1 to 2, save. Nothing changed, but it's important for us to do this, because somehow if you add some other elements with the DOM or whatever the case is, it might change. So this is why it's good to explicitly say it's going to be there. Now let's convert this to display flex again. Save, you can see how it's impact. Let's do column gap to maybe something like that. Now we have logo and this UL item. Let's work on logo display flex, and we want to do align item to center, and then some gap between, save, see gap happen. Now we want to increase this title and use the uppercase for it. So we are going to work on these things. Let's go to nav UL, and we pick the ULs. We want to do display on them, display flex, and column gap. Let's take to the li items, lists, style to none, and save. To read off the bullets, and then again take the A items, this one, text declaration, none, save, and the color, right? Let's say white. Now we want to this also to be at the center, so it's this flexbox. So logo and nav, what is it? It's there. We want to apply align items to the center. Now it's in the middle. Okay, it seems okay. So let's move to the other. So if there is something that we don't expect, we will fix it. The next one is product, which is this one. Now for products, we want grid area to be products, right? And save. Well, something like, it's something, you can see how it's messy if we don't know what we are doing. But what's really happened, because we don't have control in here for that, we wanna do what? This is going to be like that. And the last one is also going to be this, and it's going to be like that. So now it's fixed. At least it's better. You know what? In order to work better, let's do to other layouts so that we really know what we're doing. So what is the next? It's special offers, right? So let's do special offers. Grid area is going to be special offers. Achievements is going to be achievements, and footer is going to be footer. 1, 2, 3, right? So the name we gave was, I believe, this one. And for achievements, footer and save. Now you can see it's really better. It's kind of something I didn't expect, but maybe it's about this one. I'm not sure. Ah, yeah, okay. You can't use that name. This is, I didn't know. So we learned that. Okay, we got it. So we can't use something like, I believe it's hyphen, or they call, yeah, we can't use this character. So let's save. Now it works. Okay, let's work on this one, on the products. I want this to be display grid, and I will give just 2 column, 1 FR, 2 FR. Let's save. Well, nothing changed, it seems, because now if you check this, because I type what? Grid templates column, like that. Now it's 2 column. Okay, we know that it's going to be in the middle, right? So we want to do align items to the center because this is the grid container, and it's moved to there, and justify content to the center so that, well, it's not moving at the moment because we did content, but it's going to be items. Okay, but what's the point? Let's see. If we take this big picture, this one, display flex, and save, I want the direction, flex direction, to be column, and save. Actually, let's do this so we can see better things. And draw gap to maybe 10 pixel so that between these things are going to gap. See? Now we want to work on this pictures because it's like that. So backup picture, I believe, backup pictures, display flex, save, and align items to the center. Now the arrows became to the middle. Let's grab each image, these computer images, and apply the width 100%, save, height also 100%, and then the padding is 20 pixel. So now if I save, Okay, we did on this image picture these CSS rules. Now we want to work on these things, so let's do this. We selecting all the descendant elements inside that backup pictures, and we want to do the flex, let's say 3 for these things, and save, and height 100 pixel percent, I believe, or maybe also inherit, I'm not sure. Now for the arrows, if we come arrow left and arrow right, font size. Now at the moment these things are take the same amount with these images, because we gave 3. It really doesn't matter right now because there is only one value. So we want to give this to something flex 1 or whatever, because we want this to be smaller than this one. So let's save. Now you can see that it's kind of fixed. It's kind of really similar. Now we do this because we want this is to be in the middle. Let's work on here. I will make this display grid and grid template column 3 to 1 FR. Let's save. You can see we have 3 columns, and at the moment there is no row that we defined, but let's do something like to auto to like that. Remember, it's like that. Now we want this to take all of the columns, so big title, I believe, yes, big title is going to be grid column 1 to -1 because it's grid item at the moment. So you can see it takes all the columns. Let's increase to RAM 7, whatever, maybe a bit slower, I don't know. Yeah, seems good. Now we want to work on these buttons because it's like that, and let's target it. Grid column 1 to -1 and save. You see how it changed? These are moved to the implicit row because we say, hey, it's going to be this grid item from here to here. That's why it pushed others to the implicit, because we only have 2 rows that we defined. Now I want this buttons display flex, and then flex direction to be column, drove gap, something like this. Now I will target to this one, flex 3, save, and the other one, which is add, is going to be flex 1. So it's going to be 3 times bigger than this one. Actually, it's like a bit bigger. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, something like that. Doesn't really matter. Now, what about these things? You see it's like that. Dummy like it, and we have dummy like it. Now we wanna target these things, and inside them they have 2 additional elements, which is this. So let's do attribute selector equal to be detail. I mean, we are saying, hey, take the class which starts with the details hyphen, and now grid column 1 to -1. So we say this is going to be what we want from here to there, because remember, these are grid items, so we can use it. So when we save, now it became what we said. So next step is to convert these things to the flex item. I mean flex container, and they will become flex items. Save. Now they are flex item, and I can use justify content on the flex container. Space between. Save. Font size. Good, and something padding. Now we have done with this. Let's move the other, which is this one, and it's like that. Let's do display grid and display temple column. I want this to be like 3F, and 1FR. Grid template rows 3 to 1FR, because you can see it's kind of 3 items is going to be there, so that's why I give the 3 rows, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, and 3 columns. And because these are going to be bigger than this one, I mean, so that's why I give 3 3 1. And when we save, it's going to be like this. So now we have to handle this problem. Now these items are big offer, plus they have big offer, and I want them to be grid row from 1 to -1. So if you inspect it from 1 to -1, which means entire explicitly defined row. Save. Well, it takes what we said. Now let's do height, maybe like that, so that it can fit it. And width is going to be 100%, because at the moment it doesn't take. Now let's do small offer, I guess. This one. So if I say width to do 100%, because at the moment they are in the grid cell, but it doesn't take all the space. So when I do this, it will take for the height also like that. Now it looks good. Let's move to the other one. So we have this one. Remember, we made something similar to this, so it's going to be the same idea. So let's do this. We wanna do display grid template column. Remember, when we don't have how many items is going to fit, and we want to have flexibility, this is where we are going to use autofill or fit and minmax, which means let's do autofit minmax 25 pixel to 1FR. If I save, it's kind of work, right? It's really better. Now let's change some fonts. Now you can see it's kind of overflow, but we are going to handle this problem. Let's target single element. If I do display flex and save, we can use display direction or wrap. Maybe I will go for wrap. Display flex wrap to wrap. Well, it seems nothing changed because it doesn't have enough width to wrap. So let's change some logo ag, this one, to font size, let's say 6 rem, save. Now I want to also target this one. You can target with a bunch of different ways, but I will do like this. It's not have this class name, font size. Because we have only two divs, we can use this one, and if we save, now it became bigger, this one. Now let's do width to 100%, save. Now you can see that that overflow is fixed. Now let's do justify content to the center, align items to the center. So for the text special achievement, text align to the center. Yeah, it seems good. Seems good. This is it. What about if we do fill? Remember the differences? Well, in this case, it doesn't appear, but if we had really low width, it would appear. So you can do fill in this case if you want, but I will do fit. So it's done. Let's move to the here. Now it's like that, and we want to do what? Of course, display grid, right? So display grid, row gap, 20 pixel, save it, put gap between these two. Now let's select this one. We will convert to the flex. Let's do background color so that we can see really what's happening. Something like that, save. You see it's like that. Now it takes all the space like that, and we want to do what? Justify content to the space evenly so that it can spread. Save. Now it spreads. Now maybe we can give some padding. So padding for the top to bottom, left to right. But now if you check, it's kind of not what we want to do. Means we really want to have some kind of push things. You can accomplish this with some other additional grid, but I'm not going to do this. I will just do on the footer margin 0 to 100 pixel. So from left to right, we gave it to the margin so that it looks like that. Now we finished that, but we want to work for some queries, right? Because it's not responsible. Only this part, you see, because of the auto fit that we used. So let's do media queries. Now for the header, when we do this, the entire this part is disappear. So what we can do media screen and max width, let's say 90, let's say 900 pixel. By the way, some people starts to do first mobile version and then laptop or desktop size. It's just personal preference, and to understand things better, I believe it's better to implement firstly the desktop version and then convert it to mobile or laptop version. So what we say in here, when it starts to decrease from the 900 pixel, it's going to apply these things. So what are these things? Well, firstly, I want this right top header, which is this one, and also these navs are disappear. Also the nav, I want them to be display block, none. So when we decrease, okay, now it disappear, but we have to do some other settings. So our hamburger, we want this to display block, save. Now we have our hamburger. Now we want to work on the header because the design kind of changed. So we can do header grid template columns to one of our, to make things really simple. Grid template rows to auto, save. Now our header grid is like this, but we want this to be kind of like logo and nav. We will change its position. Grid column, I want this to start from 2, and its grid row is going to be 1. Save. And I want it to be justify content to the center. Good. Also for entire header, justify content to the center. Save. And let's add some padding from top and no for left side. Now it's look better. Now same thing we will apply for the product. So we can do products. I will change this to the flex because I want them to stack like top to bottom. So flex direction to the column and save. Now it's kind of fixed even with these 2 lines. And we can also have gap. Now we want these things to extend. So we can do with big picture, explain. If we do width to 100% and save, you see it's extend. And we want the text to be center, save. Well, that's it for these 2. So let's go to the footer. This one. You can do whatever pixel you want. We want to give the margin 0, but let's see this later when things get more clear. So at the moment, if I do footer icons, because we will work with the icons, flex direction, because they are already flex. So flex direction to be column, and we can apply some row gap, pixel. Actually, this is not appear right now, but if we decrease, you see it's appear. And align items center, but it's already center, I guess. Well, if we don't do this, I believe it will mess up, or let's see. Yeah, you see now, just because we changed the margin, now it was like it's center, but it's not. So this is why we have to also add center. Yeah, these are pretty much it is. In the solution part, you might see some slightly different things, but the concept is really same. Like maybe some pixels, or I don't know, maybe some row gap is not defined, but the concept is same. We covered everything about grid. We made 2 projects to learn and practice them. If you think this content helpful to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the videos so other people can also explore it. Thank you so much.